Hi, Vanessa. Welcome. I've got Vanessa Petch from HR Maximised. Just doing another one of our Q&A sessions to find out a little bit more about HR, which is obviously very topical for in the small business space. How are you going, Vanessa?
Good, Dan. Thanks for having me.
That's all right. Look, I'll jump straight in. So just three quick questions for you. The first one is around employee contracts. So how important is it to have an employee contract for your employees when you're running a small business?
Employee contracts, whilst actually not legally required, you don't need to have one. But look, we always recommend them because they protect you as an employer. They outline what the obligations are, but they really also to set the expectations of what you expect from your employee and what they can expect to you. I also particularly when you're bringing on your first employee or your first couple of employees, it's kind of hard to know what are my obligations? What am I supposed to be doing as an employer? And what can I say that my employee needs to do? A contract then kind of gives you that how-to guide. So it goes beyond just the pay. It also goes into duties and expectations, goes into company property and policies and procedures as well. But then when you're having an issue or you're just not sure, it even goes into entitlements, public holidays, annual leave, and all the rest of it. So when you're not sure about something, yeah, you can Google it. But you can also just go to your employment contract as both an employer and an employee and go, oh, okay, that's great. That's what we're supposed to do. Right, now I know what to do. So they can really lay the foundation of the employment relationship, give you that good head start on that, build that rapport with your employee because it's clear what the expectation is for both parties. But also too, it's a really great document to refer back to, and you always should refer back to it so you can make sure that you're meeting your entitlements or your obligations. But it's a really great document to continue to refer back to when you're unsure or when your employee asks a question, because it's all there ready to go for you in one document, and you don't have to go and Google and look at Fair Work and look at this and look at that and then get kind of confused. So it really is just a clear, concise document that outlines the employment relationship.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I must say, in my own experience, and obviously working with yourself, one of the first things I say to clients is, what does your employment contract say? And in some cases, I get a bit of a blank look. So generally, they probably don't have one. And then my understanding is that it sort of reverts back to the award then. So it can get a little bit tricky.
Yeah, look, it does refer back to the award, but then sometimes too, they may be award free, or it may be unclear what award that they're covered under. So if you don't have an employment contract, then you could be thinking one thing, your employee could be thinking something else, the ATO could be thinking something else, and Fair Work could be thinking something completely different. So an employee contract just makes sure that that is clear from word go. It doesn't mean that if you get it wrong in the employment contract that you're covered, but it does mean that you can demonstrate that you took all reasonable steps to make sure that what you were giving to your employee is fair and reasonable.
Perfect. No, thank you for that, Vanessa. The next question I just wanted to ask, and this is something I get a lot from clients, is, I pay above the award rate. Why do I still need to prepare an employment contract?
That's exactly when you need an employment contract. If you are paying completely by the award, you're paying every little penalty, you're paying every little allowance and every minute thing that's covered in the award, then do you need an employment contract? Not so much. But if you are paying outside of the award, and let's face it, most people are, they may look at the base rate that's covered within an award, but do they know all the allowances that are covered? Do they know all the penalties? Do they know everything outside of that? Probably not. I would also say that at the moment in the candidate market, there are probably very few employers that are finding candidates that will accept the award rate. There is a big difference between award rate and market rate. So if we took a carpenter, for example, probably should have looked this up before I jumped on the call, but the carpenter award rate is probably around $26 an hour, right? good luck finding a carpenter to work for $26 an hour. If you can find one, can you let me know? Because I've got a few clients that will use them. It is more likely that you are spending a minimum of $40 an hour on a full-time carpenter. And that is actually probably pretty low for the market at the moment. You're probably closer to that $48, $50 an hour. So if you then go, say you're paying $40 an hour, you don't have an employment contract, your employee leaves or doesn't leave and still with you, and they go to Fair Work and they say, I don't get leave loading. I don't get my safety boots provided to me. I don't get inclement weather paid to me. I don't get early start or finish paid to me. Or the big one in the building construction industry, I don't get my travel time and fare allowance paid to me. And the employer goes, well, hold on a sec. Whoa. I'm paying you above the award rate. That doesn't apply, right? Because I'm paying you $48 an hour. So I don't have to pay all this other stuff. If you don't have an employment contract that says that all of those things are offset or contained within that rate, you're obligated to pay them separately. So you could be paying $45 an hour, plus then have to pay safety boots twice a year, plus the $17 a day to turn up, plus weekend penalty rates, plus, this allowance, that allowance, inclement weather time. The amount of penalties and loadings and allowances that are in an award are ginormous. And so if you don't have that set within your employment contract, you're up for an underpayments bill, regardless of how much you've paid. It doesn't matter. They just say you didn't specify it, so your obligation is this. It would be exceptionally rare to be able to offset that in an underpayments claim without an employment contract giving you that, and a well-drafted one too. The other key point on that one is your underpayments last for 6 years. So you have to go back and recalculate that. You have to know what time your employees started for 6 years. You have to know how many rain days there were in 6 years, how many kilometers they traveled. All of that stuff, that's ginormous. Who has the time or the energy or the resources to be able to do that? One document can save you all of that hassle. So that's why if you're paying above the award, you more than anybody needs an employment contract. Similarly for a salary, I pay them a salary. Salary is all inclusive. That's just expectation. That might be our myth that we hold and our expectation as an employer, but it is not what Fair Work says. And so your obligations still contain, you can absolutely offset that. You can absolutely give a flat rate to an employee, and that be a yearly rate, but only if that is specified and offset within an employment contract. Otherwise, you're up for it. And so think about it too. If you're paying, again, a salary that might work out to an equivalent of $50 an hour, and then you've got to pay leave loading, which is a percentage on top of that, but then you haven't specified how much overtime is included in that salary, you could be up for 150, 250% of penalty rates on that already high rate. So you really, really want to make sure, if you are not following those award pay guides to the absolute letter, you have an employment contract. And who wants to follow the pay guide? I don't know if you've read a pay guide, Dan, but the building and construction one is 194 pages long.
That's what we get experts like you to read them for. So
the pay guides are over 100 pages long. Who has time? Who has the energy?
That just, I guess, really reinforces the importance of those employment contracts. That's one of the first things we ask clients when they first start up with us is, do you have employment contracts? And usually head them straight over to you, Vanessa, so they can get it all sorted if they don't. Because as you heard Vanessa say, the cost is phenomenal, and it's more it's actually getting more frequent that employees now are going to ask the question of Fair Work, because all it is a phone call for them. Whereas, and then all of a sudden you've got to provide the evidence. It's up to you to provide the evidence. So, no, very important. So thank you very much for that.
The thing too that we find, Dan, just really funnily, is it's quite often not the employee. right? So it's not the employee that started that conversation. It's normally a friend or a partner who said, hey, did you know that at a barbecue or something, did you know that you're entitled to this? And right. And that sets the wheels in motion. And I can guarantee you, once you get one underpayment claim come through, everybody gets on board. Right. And you're obligated then too. If you do realize that you have made off payments, you do have to then go and do that across the board. But one is exceptionally time consuming and expensive exercise to go under just to even do the calculations. But then the payout for 6 years for multiple employees, you just don't want that headache.
Well, you also look at the big companies that have been in the news as well recently about doing it. So it's no one's immune. So you've really got to watch out for that. One more question for you, Vanessa, if that's okay. So I get this a little bit as well. You know, a client might say, "Hey, I've found an employment contract online. What are the benefits of me getting someone professionally to do up our employment contracts?"
Look, we get it all the time too. And Fair Work has an employment contract online. And, you know, it's a great starting point. At least you have something. But do you know all the allowances that you're putting into it? Do you know all the penalty rates? Have you conducted a better off overall test? Do you know what a better off overall test is? So if you, again, you're paying by the award, an employment contract can be great from online. But if you're going to use one, only use Fair Works. Do not use anybody else's whatsoever. So you can use Fair Works, and it can be a great starting point for somebody who's. But do understand that that is going to only be covering you for the award entitlements. And if you've got anything else that's included in that, then you're probably underdoing it. The other thing too is you could make it worse for yourself because you could put something into your employment contract. And I see lots of them where the employer, just by the wording that they have put in, it's either not clear or it actually benefits the employee and they've made an obligation that they just didn't foresee. They just, at the time of writing it, they couldn't foresee that. And sometimes, Dan, a lot of the time, Dan, I sound exceptionally cynical when I talk to clients through employment contracts because they've started a new relationship, right? And they're excited by bringing on this new employee, and it's a bit like dating, and this person's going to be great and amazing. And then you talk to me, and I'm like, yeah, but what about the breakup? What about this? What about that? What about this? What about that? And they're like, oh, no, that won't happen. I'm like, So let me tell you a story, because there's always a story. I've always got a story. There's always somebody that's been through this drama before you. And I'm like, okay, so what about this happens? What about that happens? What about this situation? They're like, oh, I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
So that's unfortunately what you don't get to see. And that's what you don't get to do. So when we do an employment contract, we kind of start with the end in sight. So we look at the actual what's going to happen if the employment relationship terminates. And what's going to happen if the proverbial hits the fan halfway through? How are we going to do that? And what happens if we end up with one of those employees that's just always hand out, right? Hand out, hand out, hand out. What about me? What about me? What about me? So that's how we draft an employment contract. We kind of take all the negative stuff that happens out of an employment relationship and we put parameters and clauses in place to protect that. So then if that does happen, we've already covered that. We already thought about that, and that's already covered within the employment contract because we've explored that. But also too, what it then does on the reverse and the flip side of that and the positive stuff is then you're having some pretty good conversations with your employees straight off the bat because you're then outlaying the expectations and the parameters of the employment relationship. And that can be around flexibility. And I know, Dan, you've come to me before and you're like, oh, so they just want to work from home. And I'm like, great, that's awesome. Who's going to pay for that?
Yeah.
Who's going to pay for the phone? Who's going to pay for the internet? Well, they'll pay for that. Okay, great. So is their hourly rate enough to cover that? Let's do that calculation. Yeah. And you're a bookkeeper and, you know, we have to do that. Oh, but that's okay. They'll just work at night. Great. So they're going to come under the Clerk's Private Sector Award. That finishes at 7 p.m. Anything past 7 p.m. is overtime penalty rates. Oh, yeah, but it'll be their choice. It won't be me dictating it. The award doesn't care. At the moment, the board doesn't care what when that you've made that the employee has said, I want to work after the kids have gone to bed. There is no flexibility in that award to allow for that. So the employee then has a legitimate claim to come back and say, I worked at 8 p.m. I worked from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Let's say 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. every night. Well, under the clerk's private sector, it's a minimum of 3 hours. You have to pay an extra hour, but they didn't work it. Doesn't matter. That's what the award says, and you didn't contain it within your contract. And anything after 7 p.m. is paid at 150%. So not only are you paying 150% on the award wage, you're now giving them 150% an hour free at 150%.
And just what you are mentioning about me, just so everyone knows, I do have a flexibility agreement. I have done one up through Vanessa, so everything's all legit. But
no. We had that conversation, right?
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Which is not what you get with a template off the internet.
Correct.
So that's there where we play devil's advocate and try to protect you as an employer. But we also too try to set the employment relationship off on the right foot, because then you've had that conversation with your employee up front. You've both then got on the same page and you both understand what the parameters are, rather than having this trust and thinking everything's okay, and then finding out later, because we didn't have that conversation early on, we thought different and we weren't on the same page, and now you're asking for more. And now I have to pay it because I didn't put it within the employment contract. And I know you didn't ask me this question, but I'm gonna the whole flexibility thing, just for anybody out there who's like, flexibility is done, like it's overrated.
Yep.
Can I just give you a little story that we've got going on at the moment? So we're doing a recruitment at the moment for 2 different companies, but pretty much exactly the same job. Both accounts administrator, both working part-time, both at the same hourly rate, and similar geographical as well, both on north side, Brisbane north side.
Yeah.
So they would probably be about 10, 15 kilometers, minutes away from each other. So pretty same people, same candidates coming into that job. One is part-time office-based. The other is part-time office-based for the first 6 months. And then after those 6 months, it will be remote work, flexible work. This job got 33 applicants in 30 days. This job got 120 applicants in the first 24 hours. If you are not offering flexibility as an employer and you are recruiting right now, you have to work it out. And you have to find it, because out of those 33, you may have found the right fit. But if you have 120 in one day, you have a lot better chance of finding that right fit, right? And do not get me wrong, I absolutely do not believe that we should be 100% working from home. I actually think that it's not a good solution for us, unless it's the framework of your business. But for other businesses, we lose collaboration, we lose connection. So we do need it, but if you're not offering it and having that conversation, you're missing out on the bulk of the market.
No, look, there's some amazing points. And one other thing I would like to add with regards to the employment contracts and getting it professionally done, and this is something that we've spoken about at nauseam, you and I, Vanessa, is that legislation changes daily, weekly, whatever it is. And someone...
At the moment, constantly.
Constantly, right? So at the moment, there's court cases going through, there's new legislation coming through with the budget, new minimum wage requirements, and all sorts of other things that are constantly coming through. If you have a professional that is dealing with your employment contracts, it might even be just a quick call once a year to say, hey, just wanted to check that everything's up to date, a quick review and things like that. But there is so much, especially in the flexibility space, where there's new legislation coming through all the time. So look, I'll reiterate all Vanessa's points is get employment contracts, please.
But just have a conversation with us to start with, right? Because we'll tell you pretty quick, whether or not you can use the Fair Work one. If people have employment contracts that they currently have in their system and they want to have them reviewed, send them through. We're happy to have a look at them. We're happy to give you some, some feedback on that. We're happy to, say, you're good. I do not believe in reinventing the wheel for the sake of reinventing the wheel. People are in small business and there is a budget and a really tight budget at the moment. So money is not unlimited. I absolutely understand that. So it's not about selling the employment contract. Send them through. Let us have a look at it. Let us just identify what some of the risks are. It might not be in your agenda right now. You can put it off to later if that's the case. Or we might say, hey, you're really putting yourself at risk here right now. So I would say if you do have employment contracts, do have a look at them, see whether they're still meeting that thing. And very, very quick tip on that one is make sure there is nothing in the employment contract, if you're reissuing it from now on, that says that it's confidential and that it must remain confidential, because that was some legislation that came out in December. And even I thought it was pretty well publicized, but yesterday somebody said, oh, I didn't know that. And I went,
I didn't know that. So there you go.
Oh, you didn't know that?
No, I didn't know that.
Pay secrecy laws. Pay secrecy laws. Now you cannot say to an employee that they cannot discuss their salary. So if an employee, can't disclose it on somebody else's behalf, but if employees over the lunch table want to share what they're getting paid, they can absolutely share what they're getting paid. It's not confidential information.
So that's just case in point right there. It's information that's constantly changing. So thank you so much for your time, Vanessa. I really, really appreciate it. I'll put all of Vanessa's links and contact information and website and everything in the post. But no, thank you so much for your time and have a great day.
Thanks, Ben. Always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks.